Barbados is celebrating its 50th anniversary of independence. Brooklyn, New York is home to the most Barbadians outside of Barbados in the United States. In this program, I'll be joined by 3 Barbadians who live in the Brooklyn Barbadian community. I'll introduce them in a minute. Also in this program, Professor Melissa Jean-Pierre will be chatting with a young academic achiever, Anisha Dice, a student at the McAdamy School of Science and Technology in Brooklyn. What is the pride Barbadians in Brooklyn feel about Barbados' 50th anniversary? And how are they taking advantage of the opportunities here in New York, as well as meeting the challenges of living here? My guests are history professor at the City University of New York, Dr. Calvin Holder, attorney Randy Braffett, a former president of the Council of Barbadian Organizations of New York, and the Barbados Consul General at New York, Dr. Donna Hunt Cox. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Ms. CG, my first question is actually to you. What is the pride that Barbadians here feel?
Well, Barbadians coming to New York brought with them the pride of being Barbadian. And what does that mean? Barbados, we are proud of our history, we are proud of our culture, and our education system has certainly, brought us eons above the norm. So persons coming here came here with already a sense of pride in their origin, their education system, and the democracy that we so enjoy in Barbados.
Dr. Holder, let's jump to you as an educator yourself.
I would say that Barbadians in New York, looking at the 50th anniversary of Barbados' independence, would say that it has been a success without exaggeration. It is a society that works comparatively well. It is a stable society. Those of us who knew it before it became independent and have followed it over the decades recognize that its standard of living has risen considerably and indeed rivals some of the countries we associate with what was once called the First World. But I think that even before independence and during independence, Barbadians, whether they were in Barbados or here, had a sense of pride and indeed a sense of pride in having been Barbadians. It has been within the Caribbean a somewhat widely held view that Barbadians have a somewhat distorted sense of who they are, a distorted sense that emphasizes that they're a special group of people.
Well, the motto does say pride.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm not surprised that there is considerable evidence that they are proud of the country from which they've come and they are proud to be part of New York and the United States.
Randy Braffett, you've been involved with many Barbadian organizations here. You've been president of one of the many organizations. What is the sense of pride that you sense as a member of these organizations and that you see as expressed by these organizations?
It's a sense of competitiveness to compete on the world stage in New York City, to pride yourself in knowing where you come from, what you stand for, and what you're able to accomplish, and to present that to the world in a very organized, colorful display of excellence, because that is the pride of being a Barbadian. It is ingrained in you to always strive to be the best. And at this time, several organizations throughout the tri-state area are having so many events that will be non-stop, entertaining, and full of such cultural flair that individuals have to experience what it is to be a Barbadian.
Dr. Holder, and please don't wait on me to single you out. Jump in at any time. But let's get to Errol Barrow. he was able to look into the future and perhaps you think see the ability of Barbadians to show this pride wherever they were, both in Barbados and outside of Barbados?
He and to a remarkable degree, he exemplified the pride of Barbadians. And he was someone who had extraordinary confidence in the Barbadian people. And I think what makes him such an extraordinary figure in the history of Barbados is that he implemented something that added to the ability of Barbadians to feel that sense of pride, in making it possible for all Barbadians to have an education up to the tertiary level. Mm-hmm. What he did was he undergirded that sense of dignity and pride with certain technical skills. As a result of those changes that he implemented in the educational system, Barbadians were able to attain a level of education that is, to some degree, the envy of many places in the world. So I would, in looking at him, I think he was a man who recognized that there was that sense of pride there, but he used the power of the state to build upon it, to enhance it, and he did so quite successfully, I would say.
Consul General, what are some of the challenges that Barbadians face here in New York?
Well, I would think that the education system here and the demographics, I think, pose a bit of a challenge for some parents, especially trying to get their children to get the best education. For example, there are certain schools that target specialty subjects. And because you may not live in a close proximity, some people may tend to accept the school that is nearby, so they're not necessarily getting the best for their children, as opposed to Barbados, where any school at any part of the island is close. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's a challenge that some parents have to deal with.
What are some of the challenges, Randy, that you see among the Barbadian organizations? I mean, you deal with them on a person-to-person basis.
I think that the first challenge is financial. Having the sponsorship from community businesses to be able to fuel the efforts that they want to achieve. Mm-hmm. The second challenge is publicity. They have a very hard time publicizing themselves because the resources that are owned by the major media resources are inaccessible because they can't afford to pay for the advertisement that they require. And then the third challenge is longevity. Having their children and their children's children become invested in the organizations itself. It's very difficult for first, second, and third generation Barbadians to become invested in community organizations because sometimes they don't feel as connected because they don't remember what it's like to have been born in Barbados and to be educated through a Barbadian system and have that sense of closeness to, the island itself.
Mm. What are some of the major accomplishments of Barbadians 50 years later, 50 years since independence?
If one looks at it in terms of one's encounter with Barbadians, there's no doubt that a professional class of Barbadians has emerged in New York City over the last 50 years or so. But I would also add that if we look at the earlier movement of Barbadians to the United States, which began around the 1890s and ended in the early 1850s, we also saw evidence of that. The only difference is that in the post-1965 period, there have been more opportunities to succeed. I think if you look at the census data and you get a collective picture of the Barbadian community, you see some extremely positive things. The per capita income of Barbadians is higher than it is for the general American population. When you look at property ownership, Barbadians are well represented in terms of house ownership. When you look at income generally, they've done well. When you look at the levels of education, so you've seen a population that to a significant degree was a selective one in the process of migration and has tended to do reasonably well in its settlement in New York City. If you can indulge me for a moment, I'd like to say that
Half a moment.
just a moment. One of the difficulties that Barbadians have here, is, especially in the realm of education, is that they're not sufficiently informed as to how the educational system in the city works. They know that when you get into Harrison College in Barbados or Combermere, they know that you're being tracked for a measure of success, but they really don't know how the school system in this city, many of them don't. There are those who do, but sufficient don't, that the consequences are sometimes to the detriment of their children.
CG and also Randy, how do we fix that?
Well, the community, I think that the groups can play, the organizations can play a very good role in getting information to the diaspora, but they have to be willing to accept it. I think the challenge comes when you want to have like seminars or educational programs, how best to capture persons and get their interest in getting that information. So that's one of the challenges that I found that organizations face in getting persons to come out to like seminars and lectures, etc., to get the information that is needed.
Randy, how many organizations are there in, Barbadian organizations, are there in Brooklyn anyhow or in New York? CG, you probably have those figures to the top of your head. Randy, you may know as well.
Well, I know within CBO itself, at the time, there were 15 functioning organizations,
Okay.
actively functioning organizations at the time. But then we have also the cricket clubs and the other community organizations that are not part of that particular collective group. So that would have been like 20 or 30 organizations which exist. The numbers might not be tremendous, but they're still there.
And you have the ability now through all these social
media.
networking tools to be able to reach out to them.
Yeah.
So how do we fix the problem then that you addressed just now? How do we fix that problem?
But I want to say that
Go on.
I want to say that the challenge of some of these organizations have been that over the years, they focus on groups of similar age groups and similar interests, and they omitted or neglected to bring along the successive generations. So what has happened now is that there was no succession plan, there was no strategic plan for the young people. They were probably at home, as latchkey children, basically raising themselves on the stoop on evenings with their friends while their parents, did 2 or 3 jobs. So these organizations have now found themselves in crisis because there is no one to pass the baton to. So that's something that we have to address in terms of getting the youth engaged through social media, speaking their language, and get them to understand, take the baton to the future.
Randy, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I agree with the CG. It comes down to identifying the demographics that you have to deal with. And if you want to get younger individuals involved, you have to use the medium that they are. Now, different generations might have certain abilities to use those certain platforms themselves, or they might not. But it's a matter of building that bridge. And there are individuals in our communities who move between 2 worlds. And those individuals have to step up to help create plans. Mm-hmm. And those succession plans, as you said, have to deal with integrating the younger generations into the present system and showing them the benefit. And that's sometimes what doesn't happen. The younger generation is not going to be interested in joining an organization if they don't see a benefit of it. Other generations have seen the benefits because when they came to America, it was only them. Mm-hmm. Those were your friends because those are the people you came with, and that's all the people you knew.
I go to the foundation meetings, and there are people my age, and you don't see any young people
At all.
at all.
Yeah.
Dr. Holder.
I think what I'd like to do is to share with you what some of the recent research has shown that to a degree transcends the role that the organizations alluded to will play. What some of that research shows is that you can get a sense of where Barbadians and more generally West Indians are going to go, dependent on the kind of values and mores they're going to embrace. Mm-hmm. Thus, if they subscribe to traditional middle-class values, and those values that Barbadians have tended to support and emphasize, they will do reasonably well, and some of them will do extremely well. if they embrace an alternative lifestyle that is linked to certain aspects of black life in the United States, then they're less likely to do well, even though organizations may intervene, even though the church may intervene. And what Mary Walters and others have suggested is that the degree to which these groups, to which Barbadians and West Indians generally adjust well, is going to be linked to the values that they subscribe to. And those values are going to be engendered within a family structure. They're going to be engendered in the churches you attend. They will be engendered in the kind of clubs and organizations that are available to Barbadians.
The challenge I find with the young people is going to be difficult for us to really penetrate and to find out exactly what the interests are and to put them in the category that Dr. Holder spoke of just now. Because these young people are not really, as I said, coming out, so you're not really interacting with them. We try to speak to their parents and their grandparents to see what their interests are. So it's difficult to really predict what the future holds for them in terms of where their interests lie, and maybe their academic track will lead them. So that's a challenge that we have to face in the near future.
I keep singing this song all day.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, people want to know why you're happy so, or why whatever so Barbados I come from. Are we assimilating into the lifestyles of other Caribbean countries, or are we standing alone as Barbadians? No, you hear a Jamaican, you know they're Jamaican. You're a Haitian, you know they're Haitian. I was coming up in the car, there's a St. Lucian professor, she begins to speak St. Lucian. Are we still sounding like Bajans, or are we losing some of that?
Well, I get that all the time. I still sound like a Bajan, no matter where I go, no matter where I travel. And individuals used to ask me, especially when I was living in Michigan, why do you still speak like that? And to me, it was a very unusual question. Where do you think I was born? But what you find is that as individuals assimilate into a particular society, they become more comfortable with that society because they do not want to stand out. I was always thought that to be unique is a special character. And I think the more younger Barbadians realize that that uniqueness draws people to you to be able to do things that you need to do, that is what you need to hold on to. And I find that sometimes people are like that and sometimes they're not. It's a personal choice.
Where do we see Barbados beyond these 50 years? What is your vision, or what do you believe based on what has occurred in the last 50 years? Yes.
Yeah. I am inclined to believe that the direction in which Barbados goes will be dependent immediately or within the next few years on what happens to its economy as it comes out of this shock that was precipitated in the almost collapse of the Western economies in 2008. Barbados has been able to keep its head above water, but it has not attained the kind of economic growth that was reminiscent of at the early part of the century. And unless that economy is revived to that kind of level, there are likely to be serious problems. All right, so I am optimistic that Barbadians have the social capital, and they have the kind of outlook that eventually they will overcome these major obstacles. But for the next few years, I think they're going to be, and to use a term that you will hear when you're flying, they're going to be going through a pretty bad patch. They've already gone through a bad patch, and I think it is likely to continue. But there's something in the Barbadian character, there's something in Barbadian society that leads me to believe that eventually that society will recover to the level that it was before this economic collapse.
That's time for another discussion, because we see the same thing happening in Trinidad. We see the same thing happening in Jamaica. We see the same thing happening in Haiti, throughout the Caribbean. But as you mentioned earlier, we have always, because of our economy, been able to stay pretty much atop of the performances of the other Caribbean countries. We only have about 2 minutes left. CG, your turn.
I want to say that we have very intelligent, talented cadre of Barbadians. And I think that we always say that our human resources basically is what we have to offer. And I strongly believe in that. And by human resources, I don't mean only Barbadians who live on the rock, but we have to be able to attract those Barbadians who have left the shores and don't feel threatened that they have left the shores, but attract them so that they can understand that they can add value and contribute to the economy through their different careers and jobs.
Randy?
Entrepreneurship and expanding within the Caribbean. As Barbadians, we have a tremendous resource in the Caribbean and the Windward Islands and the Leeward Islands. We have to expand into those particular regions to use the resources that are there to create our own technology and industries to sustain ourselves. You do not need to go to other regions of the world to source materials or minerals to build electronics and technology. We have the education and we have the infrastructure now. What it takes is that we need individuals to step up and use the information and knowledge that they've gained overseas and use it back in the region to be more progressive and aggressive in our efforts for the future.
Dr. Holder, I'm going to give you a commercial 30 seconds.
Boy, that's really a
I
challenge.
know, for a professor, yes, I understand.
I would say that there needs to be in the coming years fundamental changes in the educational system of Barbados, changes that are designed to address the larger global changes that are unfolding in the world. If we are going to function in an economy that is global and that is utilizing extraordinarily effective and new technologies, we're going to have to understand how those technologies function, and we are going to have to be involved in creating those technologies, not simply be the recipient of them, but there's got to be a Bill Gates and there's got to be a Zuckerberg and so, coming out of Barbados.
Yes.
If we're going to have that kind of impact and indeed survive at the level we hope we do.
Barbados, 50 years and beyond. I want to thank my guests, CUNY Professor Dr. Calvin Holder, Barbados Consul General Dr. Donna Hunt-Cox, and Attorney Randy Braffett. And now to a high school student who is our young academic achiever. She's sitting with Professor Melissa Jean-Pierre.
Hello, Anisha. Thank you very much for being with us on our Young Academic Achiever program. You understand that you are from Macadamy School of Science and Technology on Union Street. So and not only are you an A student, but you have some special interests as well. So why don't you start off by telling us a little about your school and about yourself?
Well, my school is a small environment. What I really like most about it is that the students and the teachers can interact and they help you to excel. And whenever I have a question, I'm not afraid to ask the teacher for help, and they're there to help me, and they are embracing.
So you said that they help you interact. Can you, for example, give us an example of the setting in the classroom and perhaps what type of interest do you have in a specific subject area?
Okay. So in the classroom, there's about 20 students. And since we're a private school, we don't really have problems with the teachers. For example, if I have a question on the history paper, I can go to my history teacher after class, and then I could go to him and he'll be supportive and answer my questions.
All right, and so what about the subjects that perhaps are your favorite, and not only are you excelling in, but what would you say, what are the supportive, perhaps what type of support is being offered to you by the teacher in those subjects that you excel at? And tell us what those subjects are.
Okay, one of the subjects that I excel in and I enjoy is mathematics. And the way my math teacher helps me is if I have a theorem and I don't completely understand it, he'll go through the proof and he'll make sure I understand it. He wouldn't just quiz me on it and be done with the topic. He'll quiz me on it and make sure that I remember it, because it's not only about passing the test but making sure you understand.
Very well, and I understand that you've also done several tests so far, and you have done the ISEE and also the SSAT. Can you tell us a little about those tests?
Well, the ISEE and the SSAT, they're tests to help you get into independent schools. The SSAT stands for Secondary School Admissions Test, and the ISEE stands for Independent School Entrance Exam. And both tests, I took them in order to be qualified for the schools, because each independent schools have a specific score they want you to have in order to go there. So for the SSAT, my score was 2,091. For the ISEE, out of 2,400, for the ISEE, I got in the 880s for both verbal and reading, and I got in the 900s for math and quantitative reasoning.
So by those scores, not only have you done quite well, but what were your choices for this on your application, your school choices?
For the SSAT and ISEE, my first choice was Grace Church School, and my second choice was Poly Prep.
Okay, why Grace School? Why was that your first choice?
Grace Church School was my first choice because they're not really a big school, and based on my research, I see that the school, the teachers are also embracive, and it's similar to the school I go to now.
So you are getting ready to not only select high schools, but you will be choosing college quite soon. Can you tell us about your college choice and also what do you anticipate doing in the future?
My first college choice would be Harvard, and I aspire to be a criminal justice lawyer. And as a criminal justice lawyer, I'll focus on criminal justice reform, because several African Americans are being wrongfully incarcerated.
That is very, very high achieving for you, and we thank you so much for not only being with us on the program today, but we wish you success in your academic pursuits and remain the A student that you are. Okay, thank you very much, and now back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Melissa. We'd love to hear from you. Post your comments on our Facebook page, Brooklyn 45 TV, or email us at info@brooklyn45.com.